The gravel on Camp Theron's southern landing pad had been scorched by sun and salt for so long it had taken on a glassy sheen, like the skin of something hardened beyond recognition. Helicopters skimmed low over the cliffs, kicking bursts of heat against the compound's edge. Cadets sprinted across the courtyard under shouted orders, their boots hammering the stones in practiced rhythm. Among them stood a woman in a faded olive jacket, her shoulders narrow, her stance composed. She wore scuffed canvas shoes, with the laces uneven, and a dark patch where the sole had begun to peel. No one knew her name. She arrived without fanfare. No escort. No badge. The personnel scanner at the gate returned her file as unverified. A private manning the console assumed it was a software lag and waved her through with the same distracted nod he gave the supply drones. Nobody asked questions. She said nothing. A moment later, she was gone, absorbed into the base's motion like mist pulled into concrete. The base itself stretched across the high ridge of Calyx Island, an off-grid combat evaluation zone used by multiple nations. The barracks were minimal, salt-stained, and quiet inside. The air always smelled of steel and ozone. From above, the main yard looked like a simulation grid cut into terrain, with weapon lockers at each quadrant and live drones mapping shadow trails against the walls. No trainees ever arrived alone. No one ever arrived without rank. But she did. Rowan found a spot at the edge of the landing zone and sat quietly on a half-buried sandbag beneath the overhang of a crumbling satellite relay station. She kept her hands tucked into the sleeves of her jacket. Her hair was tied back loosely. Her blank nameplate reflected the sun with a dull gleam. Across the yard, new candidates practiced breach drills under a senior instructor's bark. She did not watch the people. She watched the rhythms, the missed beats, the delayed fire team alignment. A group of cadets passed her on their way to equipment check. One of them whispered, "Probably someone's girlfriend. Lost the reception desk." Another added, "Or glitching drone tech. We had a delivery bug like that once." Their laughter was casual, not cruel. She wasn't threatening, just misfiled. Wrong shape for the system. No one stopped her. No one corrected her. That, it turned out, was the most generous error of all. The sun climbed slowly, every few minutes. A drone zipped over the compound perimeter, scanning for heat signatures. Her outline showed up briefly on the training overlay, but the display tagged her as non-priority presence and minimized the window. System logic didn't know what to do with a person it hadn't been told to expect. By midday, her canvas shoes were streaked in red dust. The edges had begun to fray where the rubber had detached. Still, she remained where she was, not speaking, not moving, not interrupting. Cadets came and went. Staff shifted drills. The day pulsed forward with mechanical exactness. The landing zone's alarms triggered a rotation every 90 minutes. But Rowan never flinched. She remained a calm, silent figure, no more than a misplaced item in a field of structured chaos. By afternoon, instructors had given up trying to redirect her. One of them logged her in the internal system as unidentified, non-aggressive, no disruption. A maintenance team passed her with toolkits, eyes darting, then moved on. The island, carved into tiers of stone and eucalyptus groves, carried on without her. And yet, she stayed. At a distance, she could have been mistaken for a malfunctioning observer drone stationary. Unreadable. Irrelevant. The hum of drills continued. The blaring of tactical horns rolled through the compound every hour. Her silence stretched longer than any of it. She sat, watching, and the world passed around her as if she were an old shadow cast in the wrong direction. No one knew her name. No one questioned her presence. They only failed to see it. And that was how she began. It began with the shoes. Someone clipped a frame from the drone footage, just a few seconds of Rowan crouched beside the weapons tent, adjusting the strap of her worn canvas shoe. The image caught the fraying sole, the exposed stitching, the dust halo around her ankle. Within an hour, it had been uploaded to the cadets' internal message board with the caption, "Camp Ghost asks for directions." By lunch, someone had added a glowing red targeting reticle to the photo. The joke circulated fast. A recruit tossed a ration bar into her lap that afternoon as she sat near the armory crates. It bounced off her thigh and landed on the gravel. "Eat up before the boat takes you back," he said with a grin. Loud enough for others to hear. She didn't look at him. Didn't pick up the bar. Just sat with her hands folded and her gaze fixed on the training zone beyond the perimeter. An instructor walked past and stopped, half amused. "If you're going to loiter," he said, pointing toward a stack of crusted ammo crates, "you can make yourself useful. Wipe those down, so you don't get bored." He tossed her a rag. It landed in the dirt. She didn't move. The island's rhythm carried on. Drones skimmed low over the bay, scanning simulated targets across the far cliffs. Instructors barked commands through static-choked radios. The metallic clatter of reloaded rifles echoed through the canyon's walls. And still, Rowan sat at the edge of it all, unmoving, unreadable, mute. The message board filled with variations. Someone filmed her from behind. The camera tilted to exaggerate her isolation. "New bench decor." The caption read. Another showed her with her back to a review panel near the southern range, waiting for orders from God. There were no rules against posting unranked personnel. She wasn't even listed on the manifest. Officially, she didn't exist. In the barracks, the conversation changed. She became a running joke. Camp bug. Badge glitch. Unclaimed asset. One cadet suggested putting her in a laundry cart and wheeling her off the compound. Another said she was probably part of a loyalty test. A few thought she might be AI. Still, too passive, too strange to be real. No one asked her. No one spoke to her directly. Mockery was easier. By the third day, Rowan had not entered a single facility. She hadn't eaten, hadn't flinched. The same worn shoes, the same faded jacket. Her nameplate was still blank. She returned to the same sandbag beneath the comms relay and sat with perfect posture, her hands resting lightly in her lap, watching, always watching. A new recruit, younger than most, passed her on his way to debrief. He slowed, then stopped, eyes lingering on the blank space where a name should be. He opened his mouth but said nothing. His supervisor called from the distance, and he jogged off without looking back. Later that evening, the instructor who'd handed her the rag walked past again. He glanced down, expecting defiance or guilt or maybe compliance. But there she was, unchanged, the rag still resting in the dust where it had landed hours earlier. He frowned and walked away. By nightfall, someone had photoshopped a ghostly blur over her figure and posted it on the wall outside the mess tent. Spectre of Sector 4. It read, "Cadets laughed when they passed it. No one tore it down." The wind picked up as the sun dropped behind the ridge. The compound lights flickered on, casting long blue shadows across the yard. The buzz of drones grew louder, their night circuits clicking into place. Rowan remained still, framed in the flicker of the perimeter lights. Her shadow stretched across the gravel. Her silence had not broken once. No one had asked her name. No one had heard her voice. But everyone knew where she sat. By morning, her shoes would appear in 3 more memes. The nameplate would be labeled 404, and someone would post a thread speculating whether she was planted as a prank by the intelligence unit. In the background of the feed, her figure was always just off-center. Her presence was never explained. Not a single person had stood beside her. Not a single one had told them to stop. The system had no name for what she was, and so it began treating her like the only thing it understood. An error. By the 4th day, Rowan's presence had been downgraded from curiosity to classified nuisance. The camp's personnel registry tagged her under an internal flag, maintenance class, nonverbal, unverified guest, no action required, no permissions granted. Her data line was grayed out on the admin console. A junior clerk tried to file a clarification request, but the system auto-archived it as low priority. It was easier to let her drift as a clerical ghost than admit no one could explain her. At the mess tent, she approached the scan gate just once. The access panel blinked red. A subtle tone buzzed through the entry arch, a polite denial, the kind used for miskeyed IDs. No guard blocked her. No voices were raised. She simply wasn't listed. A few cadets noticed. One muttered, "System must think she's a non-combatant." Another said, "She's probably on a diet anyway." The laughter didn't carry far, but it didn't need to. She turned without protest, walked to the gravel wall behind the tent, and sat. Later, someone placed an untouched meal tray outside the door. It remained there until lights out. The next morning, a logistics officer spotted her standing near the barracks power station. He called out, walking toward her with clipped boots and a tired scowl. "You again?" he asked, holding up his wrist scanner. She didn't respond. He scanned her tag. The device returned a blank field, followed by a system note, uncredentialed, non-hostile, static. He stared at the message, then at her. "She's not a threat," he said, half to himself, half to the two cadets watching from behind a shipping crate. One of them chuckled. "Bot." Maybe the other whispered. Somebody's glitch girlfriend. Neither sounded cruel, just amused by something beneath their attention. Training patterns began to stutter. Fireteam Echo missed their entry mark on a breach trial. The drones on Range 12 lagged between waypoint calls, causing overlay maps to reload with partial data. One unit's pathfinding loop glitched during a mountain ascent sim, dragging the team 15 meters off course. The instructors blamed heat interference, memory buffer corruption, outdated firmware. A systems engineer was flown in to recalibrate the AI targeting protocols. He ran diagnostics for 12 hours and found nothing. No one looked at Rowan. She was always there, though, sitting still beside the drone uplink cable box, walking the length of the silent obstacle course just after nightfall, noting patterns others missed. She never corrected anyone, never offered insight, only watched. The gap between doctrine and performance widened. Tactical readouts from the field exercises didn't match the expected behavioral models. Instructors grew sharper. Yelling increased. Cadets sweated harder, but results continued to dip. Nobody thought to question the doctrine itself, only the human error inside it. One afternoon, while the instructor briefed Alpha Team on a reconfig, a private leaned toward her firemate and whispered, "Does she even speak?" The words were quiet, almost speculative. A week ago, no one had noticed her. Now they couldn't stop seeing her and resented her for it. Inside the systems tent, a diagnostic technician flagged an alert drone sync lag. The report included video overlays. One of them showed Rowan in the frame, standing near the drone bay while the simulation timer froze. He removed her tag from the clip before sending the file. It was easier to ignore the unexplained than to escalate a question no one could answer. Rowan moved through the gaps, always quiet, always just outside the cone of attention. She existed like a calibration fault unnoticed by design, tolerated by convenience. She didn't belong to the camp's logic model, and so, the model bent around her, hoping she would fade before the inconsistency became visible. What they failed to understand, what the code could not yet register, was the system wasn't just broken, it was misaligned, and she was already realigning it. The morning sim had launched cleanly. Smoke generators ignited along the cliffside corridor. Drones buzzed overhead, trailing red lights through the fog. 3 assault teams advanced in sync, executing a synchronized breach meant to simulate a high-risk hostage extraction. Commanders watched from the control tower, reading tactical overlays through glass. At minute 6, the breach command echoed across channels. Then something slipped. One team halted, another overextended. The last one hesitated just long enough for the trap to spring. The simulated enemy, fully autonomous bots, pinned them behind an artificial wall of flash. One cadet called out for support. Another cursed. The lead drone feed went dark. From the comms deck, someone shouted that the final stage flashbangs hadn't deployed. Another confirmed the crate had never been loaded. Someone had tagged it as optional in the inventory queue. By the time the error was caught, both Alpha and Delta teams had been flagged as neutralized. Inside the simulation chamber, red beacons pulsed overhead, sirens looped, tactical overlays froze mid-frame, instructors swore, operators slammed terminals. Across the bay, cadets staggered out of smoke, only to realize they were still tagged as downed. No one could fix it. Rowan was seated on a metal fuel drum beside the drone tent. A rusted tablet, half buried under a tarp, blinked quietly on the workbench behind her. No one else had touched it in days. The casing was dented, the screen dim. She stood slowly, without hurry, and walked to the table. She tapped once to wake the screen. Again, to unlock the field controls. Her fingers moved without hesitation. She typed 3 lines into the command prompt, then paused, waiting for the drone's internal sync to catch. The interface accepted her input. A silent acknowledgement blinked. Override authorized, basilisk key. No one noticed. Not yet. At the control tower, the map flickered. Red zones stabilized. New trajectories appeared on the display. A side panel opened, showing the missing crate manifest its routing corrected. The lead drone snapped to a new angle and began relaying clear video again. From the far range. The scattered assault teams suddenly had visibility. Their comms clicked back to life. Someone in the tower muttered, "Who did that?" Below, cadets stood frozen in the fog, looking up at the sky as the drone realigned its path. Instructors stared at their terminals. No voice answered. The fix had taken 19 seconds. Rowan returned the tablet to the workbench and sat again on the fuel drum. Her hands rested in her lap. Around her, the sim's roar faded into silence. Somewhere across the field, someone was still breathing hard into their helmet mic. Someone else coughed. Metal clinked where rifles were lowered in confusion. Inside the central feed, a line of code remained visible in the corner of the display manual override. Basilisk key. No one had clearance for that. At least, no one who was supposed to be here. The realization hadn't landed yet, but it would. Something had shifted. Something in the air, in the way the system obeyed without permission. A name no one recognized had just restored what their entire hierarchy had lost, and the one person who hadn't spoken since arrival had just made the entire island listen. The first alert blinked quietly on the command tower's primary monitor. One of the junior analysts glanced over, expecting a minor network issue or test input, but the words glowed in crimson across the interface. Override basilisk key. User Major Rowan Ward. The room went still. A second screen synced, then a third. Across the island, terminals began populating her profile. High clearance logs, biometric authorization, a rank designation flagged in bold retired, SEAL doctrine development, tactical systems engineering, simulation architect. Her file unspooled down the screen. Lines of service record and classified design logs unlocking like a code remembered too late. She was not a guest. Her name appeared at the top of the simulation blueprint archive alongside the names of the original developers who had built Camp Theron's digital infrastructure. Her signature was embedded in the core framework of the AI response tree, and her key, the one no one had seen activated in over 6 years, had just corrected their system from the inside. In the drone tent, one officer read her name aloud and then fell silent. Another looked up, mouth half open, and slowly lowered his clipboard. A nearby cadet took a step back, his boots crunching lightly on the gravel. The sound felt too loud. Rowan stood framed by the soft blue light of the drone screens. She hadn't moved. Her silhouette cast a long shadow across the fuel drum and the tarmac beyond, where spent casings from the morning drill glinted in the dirt. Overhead, one recon drone hovered in place, its rotors whispering against the rising wind. The camp had gone quiet. No orders, no chatter, just breathing, just static. She looked at no one in particular. Her voice came calmly, without effort, but carried like a crack through stone. The flashbang didn't fail. The assumption did. No one responded. The instructor who had ordered her to clean crates earlier stood beside a telemetry screen, his mouth tight, eyes locked on the name that had just rewritten every rank in the room. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The camp's control network continued updating in the background, quietly integrating her override across the cached logs. The drone hovered a moment longer, then rotated, aligning with her position. Its sensor light tracked her like a quiet salute. The screen behind her now displayed the simulation's original architect schema. Her name was embedded in the foundation of the code. Not a guest, not a glitch, not a question. The woman sitting outside the mess tent. The one mocked, avoided, erased. She had authored the very test they failed, and no one had seen her coming. The footage played on a loop during morning review. There was no announcement, no title card, just a quiet playback of the moment the system failed and the moment it didn't. Cadets watched in silence as the interface lit up with a command they'd never seen before. Override. Basilisk. Key. Followed by the drone realigning and the map stabilizing in under 20 seconds. No narration, no commentary, only the record of what had happened and who had done it. By noon, the instructor who'd assigned her to scrub ammo crates had been reassigned to logistics. His clearance was reduced. His name disappeared from the tactical rotation roster. No explanation was given, but everyone understood. The simulation officer who'd overseen the failed scenario was marked as suspended pending procedural review. His office door remained closed for the rest of the week. Cadets received a directive that afternoon unusual in tone and format. All personnel involved in Protocol Incident 94C were to submit rewritten essays on the nature of chain of command, operational humility, and the costs of assumption. Each essay required a signed acknowledgement and would be added to their permanent training files. They were given 48 hours to complete it. No names were mentioned, but everyone knew. Drone inventory checks doubled overnight. Tactical packs were scanned twice before every exercise. A standing order appeared on the daily prep board. Validate before execute. No step assumed. An auxiliary instructor quietly unpinned the mocking meme from the wall outside the barracks and folded it into his pocket before walking out alone. One cadet mid-level, confident, previously loud, sat alone in the analysis bay and replayed the footage on her personal tablet. She watched the moment the override activated, the camera panning across Rowan's still frame in the corner. The cadet paused the video and stared at the reflection in the screen. Her own face lit with the blue hue of a failure she hadn't even understood was hers. She didn't speak, just pressed replay. Outside the mess tent, the access panel blinked green when scanned. A new entry had been added to the badge registry. Major Rowan Ward, founding architect. Her name was now embedded in the system, unremovable. The island didn't speak of her, not aloud, but changes unfolded like a tide under pressure. Instructors paused longer before issuing commands. Younger cadets glanced twice at anyone not in regulation uniform. The training syllabus was updated to include a new foundational principle, one drawn from the original doctrine she had helped create. The line was simple. It appeared at the top of every tactical worksheet in bold. Assumption is the first operational risk. No ceremony accompanied the change. No officer stood to explain it. It was simply there now, as if it had always been. On the internal staff memo circulated that evening, one note appeared below the new access code guidelines. It was highlighted in gray. If Basilisk Key is triggered again, escalate to founding level protocol without delay. Do not override. No one had the clearance to edit it. The quiet shifted. The air around the compound carried a different charge. It wasn't fear. It wasn't reverence. It was recognition not of a person, but of a force the system had tried to forget. And everything that force had touched was now reclassified as essential. The sun hadn't yet broken the horizon when Rowan crossed the upper quad. The compound was quiet. The gravel under her canvas shoes damp with morning dew. Lights glowed faintly in the windows of the instructor dorms, but no one stirred. She passed the range tower, the comms tent, the drone bay. The same route she had taken each morning. Invisible. This time, she didn't pause. She didn't look back. The patrol skiff was already waiting at the reef dock, tethered loosely beside the weather buoy. Fog curled along the water, soft and silver, blurring the line between sea and sky. She untied the moorings, climbed in, and started the engine. It sputtered once, then caught, humming low beneath the mist. The sound carried across the bay like the last chord of something unfinished. From the edge of the cliff trail, a junior cadet saw her silhouette vanish into the morning haze. He raised a hand, hesitated, then let it fall. She never turned around, not when the wind caught her collar, not when the engine groaned louder against the current. By the time the fog thickened, she was gone, absorbed into the blue like a secret reclassified as myth. Back at camp, a clerk entered her final transmission into the internal log manually. It had no subject line, no formatting, just one line. You built a fortress. I left you a door. Try knocking next time. It was filed, then locked. No one edited it. No one added a signature. 2 weeks later, the intake policy at Camp Theron changed. Trainees were no longer evaluated solely on biometric scans and simulated test scores. A new requirement was added: multi-scenario clearance validation, reviewed manually. An interview phase returned, one that had been removed years ago in favor of automation. The code behind the change carried her signature hash. Instructors stopped using the word glitch. Mockery in the field was formally added to the behavioral risk matrix. Every drone operator was retrained to recognize incomplete feedback loops. No one mentioned Rowan's name, but her presence lingered in the way officers paused before speaking. The way cadets checked their assumptions twice before submitting them. Language changed. Tone softened. No one said why. In the revised operations manual, a new clause was added under doctrine integrity. It read simply, "Assumption is the first operational risk." Beneath it, in the access protocol registry, another line appeared in gray. Basilisk override must not be assumed idle. It was the smallest font in the document, but it wasn't missed. At night, during briefing rotations, cadets sat a little straighter. No one dared joke about maintenance tags or unlisted guests. One whispered once, barely audible in the flickering light of the drone feed. She changed everything. No one corrected him. Down in the archive wing, the personnel database had been updated with a single entry. Rowan Ward, status retired, clearance legacy, position founding architect. There was no portrait attached, just a record of access logs, the override that saved a simulation, and a terminal ping logged from a fuel drum beside the drone tent. Camp Theron continued. The drills resumed. The sea still broke hard against the cliffs, but the air carried something new now. Not fear, not legend, just memory, woven into the structure. She hadn't asked for recognition. She hadn't left a speech. She hadn't stayed. But what she did remained. And no one, no matter how loud or sure they became, could move forward without stepping through the door she left behind. She arrived with no badge, no rank, and no explanation. They laughed. They dismissed her. They tried to make her disappear, but Rowan Ward didn't need recognition to lead. She watched, listened, and when the system failed, she simply fixed it. Not with fanfare or force, but with knowledge no one remembered she possessed. Her power was never in volume. It was in presence. She knew who she was, even when no one else did. That is the quiet strength most never notice until everything depends on it. This story is about the kind of woman systems underestimate, the kind of change no one sees coming, and the legacy that rewrites the rules without ever asking permission. If her silence stayed with you, share your thoughts below. And if you believe in stories where strength speaks softly but leaves nothing untouched, Follow for more. The quiet ones are never truly gone.